Welcome to the first breakout session. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alicia Hovlick-Moore, and I'll be serving as the room chair for this session. And I'm very excited to introduce Serena Roberts, joining us from Moxie Analytics. I think she has the best title in the world, and I will let her talk. Woo! She's happy to take questions throughout, so if you have a question during your talk, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll have someone come and hand you a microphone.
Okay, is this on? Can everybody hear me? Good. Thank you for the introduction. Just to add a little bit more color and maybe recap, I am Serena Roberts of Moxie Analytics. I'm the Chief Get Shit Done Officer. Yes, that is self-proclaimed, and yes, I use that title wherever they will let me. Some places will not. I am born and raised in Minnesota. I have one husband, just in case you were wondering if I had more than that. I have 3 children, 2 kitties. I have been in the data space for over 20 years, and I am a fierce advocate for women and other underrepresented groups in data and technology. So lots of familiar faces in this room. Okay, so this is for those of you that might know me or have interacted with me under the Moxie Analytics umbrella. Some of you might have interacted with me under the Moxie Foundation umbrella. Some of you might not know me at all, and I'm just going to make this distinction for you. It often gets confused. So Moxie Analytics is a professional services consulting firm. That's how I pay my mortgage, right? That's where I make my money. The Moxie Foundation was also started at around the same time. That is a 501c3 nonprofit aimed at the programs that support women and other underrepresented groups in data and technology. That is how I give back. And just quick little shout out, during the month of November, Moxie Analytics is matching all donations made to the Moxie Foundation up to $5,000. So if that's in your heart to make a donation, that could be tax deductible. Can't speak for your individual tax situations, but it could be. Head over to the Moxie Foundation website and give that a go. Okay. So really quick, I'm here representing Moxie Analytics. We did sponsor this event because yes, that is how much I care about these communities and these spaces and these events. Putting my money where my mouth is. So Moxie Analytics is a 100% women-owned. I own that company, and I am 100% a woman. Professional services organization. We specialize in data visualization, data training and community building, data strategy, data governance, and data management. So all good things. Who we are. We are a very small but very mighty team. Myself and Ken and Kevin Flurledge, who are very well known in the Tableau world. We like to think that together we put the A's in data team because there are 3 of them. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to build a working or workable data strategy. I want to first start by defining what a data strategy is. Does anyone have a definition of data strategy that they really like and are willing to share? Pause for awkward silence. Okay, I'll share with you mine. A data strategy is a framework, and notice that I underscored work, for using data to support your business goals. It should ensure that your data, where it lives, how it flows through your organization, who sees it, how you manage that, supports the strategic goals of your organization. Pretty simple, right? Does anyone disagree with this? We can fight later. Just kidding. Okay. I love analogies, so I'm going to ask you to think about this like walking your dog, okay? So in this analogy, if you are the business and your data is the dog, then the data strategy is the leash. So if the leash is too short and too rigid, then your data is limited in what it can do for you. If it's too loose, and there's just a lot of, it's running wild, your dog is running wild. It is going to chase squirrels, AKA like distractions, competing priorities. It's going to get tangled in trees maybe. Think about like teams working in silos. You might end up leaving messes on other people's lawns. Think about like errors, breaches, violations, things like that. So a good data strategy will help keep things running smoothly, connected, but still flexible and moving towards the same destination. See how that, like the leash is a very, very apt analogy. And bonus points if nobody has to pick up poop with a thin plastic bag, okay? All right, so you might be thinking like maybe my organization is too small, maybe I don't need a data strategy. You might be asking yourself like, do I really need this? Can I just wing it without one? Can we just move forward? So I am no stranger to winging things. I do this all the time. I watch a YouTube video and I just give it a try. Serial DIYer. Some organizations, they do just wing it, or they don't do it with any kind of intention. Or they have one and it's so conceptual that nobody really knows how to actually like apply that to their reality. So if you're asking me whether you need a data strategy or not, and I'm assuming that you are because you came to my session, then yes, you do need a data strategy and you should definitely not wing it. So if you're going to ask for time and resources to invest in data strategy work, you might need some tangible selling points for your leadership. So here are some things that a workable or working data strategy can actually do for your organization. It can anchor data initiatives to business priorities. It can create clarity around data roles, responsibilities, and processes. It can improve access and trust in your data across the organization. It can scale data use beyond a handful of experts or data heroes. It can reduce rework, confusion, and unnecessary gatekeeping. Sounds pretty amazing, right? I don't think there's anybody here that would say they didn't want any one of those things. But you might also be feeling like this is going to be like boiling the ocean. So how do you do it? Where do you start? So shocker, you're gonna start by asking some big questions. Questions like, what are your business goals? How many people, if somebody came and asked you, someone from your organization, like C-suite leadership, they came to you and said, hey, what are our business goals? How many of you would actually be able to answer them with any real clarity? You'd be like, well, to make money, to be profitable, to be in business next year, I don't know, right? So the intention here is that you're gonna wanna anchor your strategy into the actual outcomes that the organization is trying to achieve. Because if you can't tie your data efforts back to those strategic priorities, you're building in a vacuum and it is going to suck, okay? Those questions should lead you to more questions, like what data do you need to support and measure those goals? So you're gonna wanna identify the specific data that you need to enable the decisions, track progress, and prove value, prove that you're heading in the right direction, you're making an impact. Because you can't improve what you don't measure, right? Like everyone working in the data space has heard that before. You can't improve what you don't measure, and you certainly cannot measure what you haven't defined with data that you don't have, right? So go and make sure that you can measure that progress. And if you can't, figure out if, how you might be able to do that. Create a roadmap to get there. All right, next question. How will we balance security, privacy, and governance with accessibility, scalability, and transparency? These two things tend to be at odds with each other, right? So what I'm talking about here is defining your risk tolerance with intention. Now that is a whole other presentation, but if you have questions about that, come talk to me, or we can, if we have time, we can talk about it a little more here. But you're gonna define your risk tolerance with intention, and you're gonna determine where to draw the line between enablement and protection. If you, as I said in my analogy, if you keep things too locked down, no one's going to be able to use the data, right? It's useless. What's the point? You're just paying Snowflake a whole lot of money to keep your data there, right? If it's too open, you might be putting your business at unnecessary risk. So you have to intentionally set where that line is, and be smart about it, right? Okay. Next question. So notice that I literally haven't mentioned a tool yet. Like, we haven't talked tools, we haven't talked tech yet, because that should not come first. Does your enterprise architecture and operations support or conflict with this approach, right? At this point, you should kind of have an idea, like maybe like some of the ways that you're looking at modernizing your data strategy, or your operations, and you're gonna wanna ask whether what is in place today, is that going to hinder you, or is that going to help you? Because strategy misaligned with architecture is going to lead to workarounds, right? It's going to lead to technical debt. You're gonna end up with shadow ops, shadow analytics, and people are gonna do what they need to do to run their business. Okay, you're gonna wanna ask, how will you build trust in your data? So I'm talking about things like certified data sources or trusted data sources. You're gonna wanna establish if you're gonna have those, and if you're gonna have those, how are you gonna define them? How are you gonna identify them? How are you gonna manage that? How are you gonna enforce it? And how you're gonna communicate, right? How you're gonna communicate this throughout the company. Trust is a big deal. If you don't have an effective way to establish that, build or repair, rebuild it, you're gonna have some problems. Big ones, no matter how amazing the rest of everything else you do is. Okay, and then last but not least, what is your plan for adoption and change management? So please know that even the best data strategy in the entire world, with the best tech stack, the most expensive everything, that's gonna fail without buy-in, training, and support. Because change does not happen because we built a shiny, fancy slide deck and presented it to a few people. It happens when people understand what is changing, why it's changing, and what's in it for them, right? They have to understand how that value connects to them personally in their day-to-day job. I love to do these little love notes to data leaders. Some of you might have seen these on LinkedIn before. This is my way of lovingly sharing some hard truths that I think we all need to hear. So don't try to tackle these questions in a vacuum. Data teams can't do this work. You know, if you think back to those questions, they were all very business focused and business related. You have to have that lens. You have to have that perspective. You need that representation from across the business in order to get good results. Any questions so far?
Okay, we have a couple questions that have come in on the chat. So the first one is, when would you change your data strategy? And the commenter says, it's a bit convoluted at my job.
Yeah, now. The sooner the better. If your data strategy is not working, it's not gonna work better tomorrow. So when you see an opportunity to have conversations, take them, right?
And then the next question is, I work for a company that I've watched struggle to create concrete goals. Do you have any advice on how to guide or ask questions of leadership to define these goals so that we can create the foundation to build on?
Yeah. That is so as data people, we can't answer a lot of those questions, right? Like we can't, what are your business goals? That's not our job to answer those questions. We don't get to create that. So if you have leadership that can't clearly answer those questions, I think that's probably a bigger problem. As in whatever role you are working in data, whether you're trying to build a data strategy or a dashboard or a governance model or whatever that might be, you are responsible for asking good questions and peeling back those layers of why. So my advice to that person is when you ask, what are your business goals? And they say, to make more money. Why? Why do you want to make more money? What are you going to do with that? I'm going to buy a yacht. Why, right? Like eventually you're going to be like, I need a new job, or you're going to get to something that matters. So yeah, but there's only so much you can do about that. Good questions. Thank you. Okay, so what is next? We haven't really boiled the ocean yet, but we have a few pots rolling on the stove. We've uncovered what matters most, what you really need, these good questions that we listed, and most importantly, what are the trade-offs? Like the trade-offs that you're willing to make to achieve that strategy or not, right? You know where that line is. So you're going to take the answers to all of those questions, and those are going to become the pillars of your data strategy. You're going to use this as think of it as a practical framework to build from. Turning that information and that extra clarity into a workable plan. And that's my whole emphasis here, is that you can work it. You can take that next step. It isn't conceptual. At least have visibility into that next step, and the next step, and the next step. So the next steps can be broken into 3 familiar phases. We are going to assess your current state. You're going to define your target state, right? So where you are, where you want to go, and then you're going to map how you will get there. Everybody this is not an unfamiliar concept, right? Assess current state, future state, and then you're going to map the gap. Let's talk a little bit deeper about each of these phases, because I think even conceptually, just talking about those phases can be too conceptual for people. So when you are assessing your current state, you need to make sure that it is an honest, judgment-free assessment of how things actually work today. So this is not about assigning blame or perseverating on the negative, right? So as you have these conversations with people across the business, try not to let it turn into just a bitch session, right? Just the complaining about what doesn't work. You want to understand it, document it, and move on. So yeah, this is really about surfacing the reality of what's happening today so that you know where change is needed. Although people will take the opportunity to use it as a therapy session, and sometimes you just gotta let them. Okay, so some tangible things that might come out of doing this, assessing where you are, you should have a sense of what is working and where people are stuck across the organization. You should have insight into whether your current tech landscape can scale with you, or if it's going to hinder. You should have visibility into architectural infrastructure gaps that you're going to need to address. So this is where you might be thinking maybe we do need some kind of a tool to support where we're going. But you need to know that first before. Don't reverse engineer that, I beg you. You should have a read on whether governance is enabling or restricting data use. You should have an understanding of where trust breaks down, a snapshot of data literacy skills gaps, and how connected or isolated your data community is feeling. Any questions on assessing your current state? All right. Oh, what questions on
All right,
online?
so, yep, online. So Robin asks, I work for a large company, and I'm not in a position to influence the data strategy. But if I want to adopt best practices within my reporting team, does that cause harm to the enterprise strategy?
I think if you're doing anything that's in direct conflict with anything that has been established, I would caution you on that. But if you do have opportunities to have conversations about ways to change that, have them. But if not, and you can become an example of how you think that things should be done, do that to the extent that's possible. And then document those stories, share them broadly, and try to gain some momentum. Get your friend, your analyst in another division to do it the same, and start collecting those stories. So, good question. All right, so defining your target state. So this should be a realistic vision of how things could and should work, not some pie in the sky, unattainable dream world. So that's an emphasis that could this work? This future state should align with your business goals, your intentionally set risk tolerance, and your actual capacity to execute. So if your data strategy is like, we need to add 15 more resources to our team, and you know that that's not in the budget, like, you know, you gotta balance that with what's real. Maybe put it in your roadmap, you know, your long-term roadmap, but you do have to start a little bit more anchored to your reality. I will also say about defining your target state, like, don't worry about getting in too much into the weeds. You do not need to define every tiny detail. This is really just about being clear in what your direction is and what is feasible. So it's essentially so you know where you're working towards and that you can and will get there is the main point. All right, defining your target state. This might lead you to create a diagram of your ideal tech landscape and how your data ops support it. I'm a huge fan of using any kind of like visual diagramming tool. I like to use Excalidraw, big fan of that. And it's really just like, you're gonna map how, like, where your data comes from, at high level, kind of where it goes, who touches it, you know, where the ETL happens, where the silos are, where the partnerships are. That can be a really great way to go. This is where we get stuck, this is where we need help, this is right. So, and it's a good way to communicate this to others, particularly who are not super technical, because this should not be a super technical document. A conceptual data model of your critical data domains and how they connect. I have a whole other presentation about how a conceptual data model can be used inside your organization to align, like, there's just a whole bunch of benefits in doing so. So be sure to do that. Let's see, a working model of your organization's data risk tolerance, clear definitions of who should have access to which types of data under what conditions, and a framework for training, upskilling, and building a stronger, more connected data community. All right, last, you're going to map the gap. This becomes your action plan. It's a practical, focused roadmap that guides you from where you are today to where you want to go. Again, you're not planning every single step for the next 5 years. You are identifying the work that matters most right now and building a path that is flexible enough to evolve with your organization, because it will, trust me. The only sure thing about plans is that it's not gonna go that way. So you gotta be able to pivot. Mapping the gap might include you to create a prioritized list of metrics or outcomes directly tied to those business goals, a short list of high impact use cases that require clean and accessible data. Those are your short wins, your quick wins. A focused set of data domains that deliver the most immediate value. A high level timeline that outlines key phases, milestones, and early wins. And of course, a communication plan to keep stakeholders informed and engaged, critical. So this step is really where the strategy work becomes real. It becomes a tool to help you sequence your efforts, make better decisions, and build lasting momentum. And P.S., you are not going to get good info without actually talking to a representative sampling of people across your org. Reminder, you have to talk to the business, okay? Some analytics functions are already embedded in the business, which makes that a better place to start. So, okay, congrats. Now you're ready for the hard work. It's relatively easy up until this point. Okay, so the hard work that comes next will look different for every organization, but it usually starts with some version of these 3 objectives in this order. You're gonna sell it up, you're gonna enforce it down, and you're gonna operationalize the heck out of it. Let's talk quickly about each one of these things, each one of these phases in a little more detail. So when I say executive sponsorship, I'm talking about sponsorship that is more than just lip service. You need to make sure that your leadership understands the why, commits to the how, and reinforces, repeats that message every chance that they get at every level. Enforcing it down. This is about setting expectations, defining roles, and ways to create accountability. This is not about locking things down, remember, right? Too much, that leash is too rigid, no one can use the data, it's pointless. This is about making sure that your strategy is real, supported, and consistently applied. Operationalizing means you're gonna build the processes, the platforms, the playbooks, the workflows that make your strategy usable. You're gonna embed it where you can into day-to-day work. You're gonna train people, you're gonna communicate, you're gonna automate wherever you can, and you're gonna wanna make this feel less like a project, right? With a start and an end date, and more just like, this is just how we do things now. Get on board. Okay, my last little love note to data leaders. Strategy will not solve every problem, but it does make the next step clear. Without one, every decision can feel harder than it should, and every roadblock can feel like a reason to quit. But don't do that. Keep going. Okay, how much time do we have for questions? 5 minutes. Okay. Questions, or did we get them out already?
Okay, so this seems like a really Herculean effort, just even from like a timeline. And so when I think about part of the selling up is also having some type of ROI back to the business on why the strategy setting is important, because business objectives, part of it.
Yep.
But how do you actually get dollar amounts translated so that you can get this shit done?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 sort of points of potential investment. One is to just to do this work, right? So there's doing this, there's defining what our data strategy should be, and then there's the implementation of it. And defining it should be way cheaper than actually implementing it, right? So my hope is that you can take some of those selling points and get that yes to invest in the data strategy work, to come up with a plan and say, here, if we want our data to actively support the strategic initiatives of our organization, here's how we're gonna do that. Here's how we're not gonna waste more money, create technical debt, have redundant workflows, right? Here's how we're going to turn our data into an asset rather than a liability, or at least mitigate those 2. Then, part of your roadmap should include where you need those investment points. So if you have, we need more people, we need to hire this role here, we need a data management, data cataloging tool here, or something along those lines, it's best to put those out, at least at a high level, as early on as possible, so they are not surprises. But yeah, depending on the size of the organization, and where your starting point is in relation to where your target point is, it can be a big Herculean effort and cost money. But there is a reason why this work gets done and why it gets traction, and that's because it is effective. I've been doing this a long time, and I can tell you that the number one reason why the people's data efforts fail is because they haven't thought about any of this with intention in a way that's rooted in both strategic business goals and the reality of their situations. So thank you for the question, Kirsten. Go ahead.
Okay, we have another online question. So this writer works in a small or newer function within a large org. So far, we've gotten away with cherry-picking stats to show ROI to leaders. My leader is opposed to formal KPIs in case they don't reflect well on our performance. Any tips for this?
My advice is to focus on stories. Just like humans love stories in the first place. So if the numbers themselves, the raw numbers themselves are not impressive, weave it into a story. Put some, like a story arc in there. Have it be, connect to them on an emotional level, rather than, if connecting it to a, positive perception of dollars or, some other measure is harder. People love stories. So, and I'm a big fan of like documenting, like when you do work for somebody or, deliver something, whatever it is, jot down some notes, right? Just like a couple bullet points about what it was. And then you can go back and just use that to jog your memory. And, you can plug that into ChatGPT and be like, can you just make this into a story and just save me the time? And, pump those out in a newsletter or, something like that on some kind of regular cadence. It's about making sure that people remember that you're there and that you're doing good work, even if you don't have the best, KPIs or numbers to show for it. So, good question.
Last quick question.
There is an online question unless there's one in the room.
All right, we'll take it.
Okay. Can you talk about the technology that will enable a better data strategy, and are there any best practices?
Well, I absolutely hate giving blanket technology recommendations because I just feel like that is so specific and unique to where people are right now and where they want to go. Like, I could tell you some of my favorite tools, but again, it's context specific. So I think maybe I'm gonna save that. But for the work of developing a data strategy, ladies, just get Excel or some PowerPoint, or it does not need to be a fancy tool. You can use Excalidraw. You can use paper if you want to. Whatever is going to help you pull information from the business, understand what's happening. You're going to want to document that in a way that you can share with other people effectively. So whatever technology you have available to you that feels like the right place to do that, just to do it. It's going to be better than not doing it, hands down. So I do have some printed, physical, real live in the real world copies of sort of the presentation that you saw today in ebook, the physical version of ebook form on the table here. So if you'd like one, come grab one. Otherwise, you can go to moxieanalytics.com and download the ebook there as well. So thank you so much for your time and being here.
Thank you, Serena.